Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi. It's going to be a real cool show tonight. If you were a fan of Boston Public like I was, you saw this fine, talented actress. She's done so many other things in her career. Who could forget her in Red Velvet as Amy? That's just, just a little sample of what she's done. But I am honored to have on the show tonight the one and only Natalia Baron. And Natalia, thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So Natalia, let me ask you this because we'll get to how your acting career really took off. But when you were a young kid, did you have a desire to be an actress, or did that just kind of happen over time?
Yes, my mother named me after a ballerina, Natalia Makarova, and I started dancing when I was 3.5. And I don't remember when I was 4 seeing a play at school and telling her, I wanted to do that. And she told me I made her go tell the teacher to let me in the class, like younger than normal. I don't remember that, but I'm sure it's true because I vividly remember being 6 and in like an acting class, summer camp sort of class. And my best friend at the time was in a Pound Puppy commercial, and I was so jealous that she was in the Pound Puppy commercial. I wanted to do that, and her grandmother happened to have been like the one kids agent in Miami at the time, and I used to like parade around in front of her, wanting her to, want to sign me too, which she did. And my mother took me to one professional audition as a child, and I remember the casting assistant coming around and asking for everyone's headshots. And my mom was like, "What?" And she pulled out like the little school picture, from her wallet, and was like, "Here, but you have to bring that back." And I saw that everyone else had headshots, and I was so embarrassed that I didn't have the routine right or whatever. And it was for like a kids like industrial video kind of a thing, like something they show in schools or whatever. And when I got it, my mom was like, "Okay, no, you can't do any of this until you're 18. You can do plays at school, you can dance, but." And I thought that she was like thwarting my dreams, but in retrospect, I'm so grateful that I had a regular high school experience and still got to dance and sing. And she was super supportive when it was time to go to universities, and conservatories, and I did the whole audition process for all of that, and everything. But it was always, I just always knew what I wanted to do, which I know, my field is very competitive, and one in a million and all of this. But I that never sort of bothered me because I had so much support. And also I always felt really blessed that I knew what I wanted to do, because so many people spend their whole lives like not knowing. So
Right. And let me ask you this, Natalia. One of the things too that I find interesting more than anything else is the fact that kids get into dancing so young. You mentioned 3.5 years old, and that's a lot of commitment. It's not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of hours during the week that kids take part in dance to kind of perfect the 90-minute, whatever you want to call it, performance that they do. So let me ask you, was it very demanding as a young kid when you were in dance? I mean, did you find yourself having to do it, you know, throughout the week a lot?
I it was always by choice. Like my mother loved the arts, and I was very blessed that like starting very young, she would take us to New York at least once a year, if not several times a year, and we'd always see like the big shows that were happening, on Broadway at the time. But it was never ever anything that she wanted for me or pushed on me. She just, really was a wonderful mother. Um, so it was all like me, like she introduced me to it, and I fell in love, and I was very disciplined and serious about it, all of my own accord. So I loved having class several times a week. I loved doing Nutcracker every single year. I took great pride in that. I mean, when I was a child, if all my dreams came true, I would get, I would be a prima ballerina, a successful actress, get an Oscar, and then maybe be president. But I don't really care about the president part. I just threw that in to like make my mom feel like I had more ambitions than just the one. But sadly, being a prima ballerina, you have to have like a very God-given certain kind of like shape of your leg and arch of your foot and whatever, so no matter how much I would try, I would never be that level. So I eventually, you know, transitioned to less ballet and more just the acting, and I did sing and I still sing, but um so no, the discipline of it never bothered me. I actually really wanted to audition for like the high school, performing arts magnet program as a child, and I that was another chance that my mother let me audition, and then when I got in, it was like no longer my choice, and I had to stay at the prep school I was at, which I'm very grateful for as well, because even though it was more of like a college prep school, like we I won best actress at state, the thespian conference, and like I was in an a cappella singing, like all girls group that we got to like sing in Vienna and we in Prague, and we won competitions, and so I still got the benefit of like a really wonderful education, which I think actually prepared me for what I do even more. Like I had excellent modern drama teachers in high school, and English teachers, and a little bit more of a traditional high school experience with like different kinds of kids who were interested in different things, and actually so many of the kids that I did go to school with ended up in my field and very successful, so that's also quite nice.
Right. And Natalia, let me ask you this. You talked about how much you love singing and dancing. A show that was very popular, I know it was when I was a kid, and it started as a film, then it became a TV show, was of course called Fame. It was about a high school where kids went to, and they learned, musical arts and dancing and stuff like that. Were you a fan of that show as a kid?
To be honest, I mean, I know exactly the show you're talking about, but that was like a little before my time, I think. So I didn't actually ever watch it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I think it was based on like the true story of like the New York City School of the Performing Arts or whatever. So I do know what you're talking about, but I never saw it. But I'm
Right.
sure if I had, I would have felt like that was, where I was meant to be or whatever.
Right. Now, Natalia, I know it's hard. Like, you go through different parts of your life where, you kind of look up to different people. But were there any? You loved the music, you loved dancing, you loved acting. Or was there anybody as a kid that you really, I don't want to say emulated yourself after, but that you really idolized? Like any actors or musicians as a kid?
I mean, I love music so much, and my musical tastes are so varied. So not necessarily wanting her life or career, but I've always loved like Nina Simone. I've always loved
Yeah.
David Bowie. I range from like Thelonious Monk to, Radiohead. But certainly like Audra McDonald is an amazing soprano. So when I used to sing more than I do now, I loved her voice. I was, I'm a soprano. I loved her voice. I saw her in a show called Masterclass on Broadway. One of the times that my mother took me, it was starring Zoe Caldwell, and it was an amazing, I think it's a Terrence McNally play, but I could be wrong. But she sang, and it was, she's really wonderful. And as far as actors go, um, as a child, I don't know if I necessarily looked up to anybody in particular, but I used to like watch old movies with my mom as a kid, even like I remember seeing, like old Audrey Hepburn movies, and uh, To Catch a Thief. What else did we watch? So I always like really loved the art and the glamour of it, and the whole like world creation. So I just think I wanted to be a part of it more than anything else. I mean, as I got older, I mean, I think Penelope Cruz is amazing. I mean, her performance in Vicky Cristina Barcelona is just one of the
Yeah.
most fun, most. I mean, she won the Oscar, didn't she? I mean, She was incredible. There's so many. Ellen Burstyn's amazing. I always loved her. And for men, gosh, I mean, nowadays, I think Ryan Gosling's super, super talented. I mean, there are a lot of people that I would love to work with. I don't know if there's anybody whose career I'd want. I think everybody has their own journey. Actually, maybe I take that back. Kate Blanchett seems to be able to do it all. Who wouldn't want to be her?
Right. And speaking of dancing, Natalia, you also are a big fan of salsa dancing. You do that, kind of as a hobby. How did the love for salsa dancing start? And, what's the difference between just being an actual dancer and doing something like salsa dancing? Just explain that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I took more ballet than anything else. When I went to NYU, I also took like rhythmic tap, which was so fun. And it was like right around the time that the Savion Glover show, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, had come out. And he's like so talented. But rhythmic tap is a lot more like hip hop. It's not like up and poised, it's more like down and like loose. So it was very difficult for me, but something that I truly, wanted to be able to do at a higher level than what, my ballet training had taught me. Salsa dancing, I am by no means a professional, but my mother was Cuban and Gallega, like my grandfather was from the north of Spain. And I grew up in Miami and I, learned Spanish along with English since, infancy. So the music, Cuban music, like Afro Cuban All Stars, all of that was always a part of my childhood and my upbringing. And, you know, here I live in LA now, and here, like, people don't dance like they do in Miami. Like, in Miami, like, you could be at a dinner party, a house party, a high school party, a whatever party, and everybody dances. Like you turn on music and it's just part of what you do. So Cuban music has always been a big part of my life, and salsa dancing is an extension of that. Um but as far as like the specific steps that it isn't this form or that form, like that, I just fake it.
Right. Right. Exactly. Now you went to a high school called the Ranson Everglades High School. Just talk about that. And you mentioned that again. It was like a prep school, correct?
Yes, it was like a high school, like a preparatory school. Like most of the my classmates ended up going to like Ivy League schools and having more traditional careers and things like that. Um, but we did happen to have like a really wonderful theater department and music department, and I like they offered things like AP Music Theory, which I got to take, and we did have excellent teachers and competed and won competitions and things like that in those areas. The campus itself is so beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been to Miami, but it's like a lot of high schools on the water,
Yeah.
which is truly amazing. And since it's Miami and the weather is nice, a lot of the campus is open, and a lot of trees and greenery and all of that. And the education I got was really so wonderful that when I ended up going to college, like I remember one of my first, I went to Tisch as a musical theater. In their musical theater program, but that was between my junior and senior year of high school. So it was like a summer program that you got college credit, and then at the last minute, I chose to come out to California instead of going back to New York when I graduated. So I went to USC, and I was a theater major, music minor. And I remember freshman year, one of our theater classes was on like Spanish classic theater, but I had read everything, written all the papers, but in an AP Spanish class. So I just basically translated it all. So I mean, that's just one example of like the level of things that I was exposed to and education I got to have given the high school I went to. And like I mentioned, I mean, quite a few of my classmates ended up in my field and at the highest levels, and that's really wonderful. Like actually a film that I was supposed to start in 2 weeks, in Miami, which got pushed a month, came to me through a childhood friend of mine who happened to now be, one of the big casting execs at Fox. In the last several years, and he, knew about the project and brought it to me, and asked if I, wanted to be involved or whatever. And he's just one example of the classmates that I had. So it's a nice place to have gotten to be a part of. Yeah.
It's kind of ironic too that it was a summer program that you got college credit for at you know Tisch school, because what I was thinking about was you're finally going to get to. I was curious to see how going to New York, being so used to being in Miami, and now you got to wear a winter jacket and stuff, but you
Oh,
never
it was
really
a
got.
summer program. I
Yeah, but
know.
you never got to experience it. So again, it kind of worked out for you because you went to New York at a time where it's got like Miami weather. So
I know, I
yeah,
know. I love New York so much, and I always put it out to the universe that if a show takes me to New York, then I'll move. But I don't think and I have so many friends and colleagues in New York, but I have yet to brave the full winter there. And every time I go for work or for fun or whatever, even if I bring all the coats I have, I still end up like still too cold. you know
and another thing that is in a lot of ways, it's crazy how your acting career kind of takes off by accident, because you had went to USC's School of Theater and Music, and that really, it was there where David E. Kelly happened to he noticed your work, and that's really how he kind of took you under his wing, and obviously brought you into Boston Public. But talk about being over at that
well,
school.
that's partially true. I mean, I did go to USC. I got close to finishing, but didn't. Which my mother, was very proud of me and very excited when I got Boston Public, but was like, I left out, like I hadn't finished like my science credit or like my math
Yeah.
credit or whatever, like my general education credits. And she was like, but when are you going to take math at USC? And I was like, I don't have to. I teach physics on Boston Public for David Kelly. Because my character was the physics teacher or whatever.
Right.
That happened because I used to, like when I started my career, I used to I mean, I used to get the breakdowns, if you know what breakdowns are. I don't know if your audience does. It's basically what only like agents and managers get.
Yeah.
That's, they come out a couple times a day. And it lists like all the projects that are casting and like, a little bit of the information, the roles, whatever. And that's how they choose which clients they're going to submit. And I remember like friend of a friend was like, if you send a check to the sketchy like PO box, then you can get access to the breakdowns and blah blah. And that was like a whole thing. So I used to get them like every day, and this was back before electronically submitting. So I used to send hard copies of my picture and resume, like hundreds out, like every week, and I would just like say a little prayer and like give them a kiss and blow, whatever. And for all the ones I sent out, like very few, because I had no agent or manager, I would get a call about, right? But the times that I did, it was always for something really like extraordinary, and somehow would end up, I would get called back for it, things like that. And at the point in my career where the David Kelly happened, I had submitted myself for a film that I didn't know was any sort of big deal at the time. It was, but the lead was like a high school, Latina. She was like smart. She was this, she was that, whatever. And I ended up getting called in, and I did have a manager at the time, but that manager had literally never gotten me an appointment ever. Didn't get this one for me, nothing. And I kept getting called back and called back. And as I got down to like, the end of the process, I started to realize when I was signing in that everyone else was from like CAA, ICM, William Morris, and then there was me. So I was like, oh my God, this must be some sort of big deal, I guess. And I ended up, I found out it was Robert Redford's son's directorial debut. and Sam Shepard was attached at the time to play one of the leads. And so I got down to the wire, and I ended up being first choice for it. But the manager that I had, who hadn't gotten me the appointment, sent me to the day after the final callback. So I showed up at the studio, and the security guard was like, "They're not here anymore." And I was like, "What do you mean? I have an appointment?" And I showed them the paper bowl, and I made them let me on the lot, and I went to the room, and like they weren't there anymore. And I was like beside myself, didn't know what to do. I went to Samuel French, which is, the bookstore that used to be on Sunset that has like plays and casting director books and whatever. And because this is again before you could just look these things up on the internet. And I saw that I found the address of the casting director. I went to that address, and because it was a book and it was like, had been printed, before right now in the moment, that office was now a like a music recording studio office. And I was like, again, like flipping out, what do I do? And the receptionist there took pity on me and gave me the forwarding number of the casting director. And I called, and this took me all day to figure out. And it was like almost end of business. And the assistant who answered was like, "Oh my God, she's been trying to reach you. Here's her home number. Call her." And I was like, and I did. And she was like, "I'm so sorry. We had to offer it to somebody else because you didn't show up." But she set up appointments for me with agents and managers. And she was like, "You have to leave your manager." I never could get them on the phone. I just kept trying, but I knew that, there was something about you. I wanted to bring you in. And the first appointment that I went on the next morning was with the manager I was with for many, many years. And the first audition they sent me on the next day was for the Luis Guzman pilot for Fox to play his daughter. And I read for it in the morning, got called back in the room, came back later that day, read for Will Gluck, who was the showrunner of that show. And by the end of that first day, I had a test offer. And from that, I got my first agent, which was William Morris. And so I was with William Morris for like 6 months before getting Boston Public. But in that 6 months, I got like every opportunity under the sun. And it was such an amazing, wonderful, beginning of my career. But I kept getting close to getting things, but because I'd literally never done anything, like not a commercial, anything, like everybody was afraid to hire me until David. And David, I read for the new series regular on his other show, The Practice, one of his other shows. And he thought that I was too young to play like my age at the time, which was like 20 something. But he liked me, so I heard he was rewriting the new series regular on Boston Public to be Cuban and be me. And so he rewrote the new series regular on Boston Public to be Cuban and be me. And I still, the studio made me, test for it or whatever. But I got the part that was written for me, and that was the first thing I ever did.
Well, I'll tell you this much, Natalia. I hope you did fire that manager because,
Oh, yeah.
It seems like to me, he or she just did not, look after you like they, were hired to do. But what's crazy is, Natalia, is Boston Public at the time had been a very popular show. And David E. Kelly, I mean, I could think of shows like Picket Fences, which was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You mentioned The Practice. And then you're going on to a show. It's not bad for your first time getting
Oh,
your first big break. You got people like Five-ish Finkel, who've been in the
oh my
business
gosh.
60 years, Kathy Baker, Anthony Harold, Chai McBride. I mean, all these great actors, and the show was just so innovative. It really was. And what I really loved about your character is your character was very controversial in the sense that Carmen Torres, she clashed with Steven a lot on the show because she wanted to only speak Spanish to her class, to her kids, and he was very adamant that she couldn't do that. And they kind of butted heads a lot, but at the same time, you could see there was a respect there. But I mean, they came up with such a great, storyline for you. Talk about just going on that show and working with the people you did, but also
Thank
having
you.
a great storyline like you did.
I mean, yes, I was it was such an amazing first experience. I was very, very blessed. I mean, yes, you know, Five-ish was, I didn't know who he was before, but I of course learned who he was. And actually, like, one of my TV agents at William Morris was like, "Oh, Five-ish Finkel," and I was like, "Who?" And he was like, "He started in vaudeville, you know, but like, you know, he was a very big deal." And the ones I was aware of were Michael Rappaport, and I was a huge fan of his. I loved a movie he did called Beautiful Girls.
Right.
With I loved that movie with like baby Natalie Portman and whatever. And but truly every one of the series regulars and you know the supporting leads that they brought in were so remarkable. You know, I mean, they brought Milo Ventimiglia to play my love interest, and I never watched Gilmore Girls, so I didn't know who he was. But
Yeah.
he is so talented and has you know continued to be such a wonderful success. But I guess you know it's funny. The part was I was so amazingly lucky to have it be written for me. And through the course of playing Carmen, like I see in retrospect, and I even saw it a little bit at the time, how much it was informed by like where I was right there in my life. Like Carmen was she was you know, a student teacher. Like this was her first job and she looked like a student, but was being a teacher. And she loved her job and she was great at her job, but she also was like scared shitless, you know, and she was like
Yeah.
all this bravado on top. Like she had the chops, but she had never used them before. And that was exactly me. Like my first day on set, I remember, you know, I was very lucky that especially the first, you know, 10 episodes of that season were very heavy on my character. So, you know, I came in like super prepared because my acting coach at the time, who also has gone on to be such a tremendous success, my acting coach was Taylor Sheridan, who now is like a huge showrunner, screenwriter in his own right. You know, he was like, "You are never allowed to not be prepared." He's like, "Everyone else can fuck around, but you, this is your first job." He's like, "You know your lines, you're never late." He's like, "You're never tired, you're never anything." And he was absolutely right. So I remember like my first rehearsal with Shy McBride, you know, who played our principal and was like the lead of all of us. It was his first day back to school, you know. So I remember he walked in with like swagger and like was like, "Oh, I haven't even read the script yet," you know, because he's earned that right, you know, and
Yeah.
he's played this character for years and he's a brilliant actor. And I was so nervous. And he was like saying all of his lines at rehearsal in like an accent, sort of like just to like, you know, entertain the crew. And I think also to maybe like try and like throw off the new girl or something. And I was like, so nervous that I think my hand was shaking. And I was like, you know, sort of even vibrating inside, but I got out every single line without even looking at the paper, didn't mess up. And then I was so young and so naive and so full of like, you know, whatever piss and vinegar that like when we were walking to our trailers our dressing rooms after I was like, "I'm not scared of you." I was like, "Is that all you got?" "I'm not scared of you." And like walked away. Like what would and I remember it took a couple of weeks for him to like finally like say something to me. And he was like, "Hey kid, you're good." And I was like, "Thank you." You know, but it was stuff like that. So I guess you know, the fact that I was brand new and had all this you know, bravado covering the fact that I was prepared yet nervous, you know, was very similar to the role I was playing. Um, but I learned so much. I learned so much because again, I'd never done anything before. Um, One of our executive producers who was also an executive producer on Picket Fences, directed my first episode. And I remember like the first day on set, he was like, "This is a mark," you know, like where they put the tape on the floor, you're supposed to walk from here to here. And he's like, "And that's the camera." He's like, "Don't look in the camera." And I was like, yeah, I get that, you know, and he was like, "Okay, so you have to get from here, this tape to that tape, and without looking at the camera." And I was like, "I understand." I was like, "I danced my whole life." I was like, "I understand," you know,
Yeah.
but they were just very afraid that like I wouldn't know how to do it because I had never done it before, I guess. Um, but the other experiences in my life had sort of set me up to know how, and also that acting coach I had sort of like was so brilliant. He like walked me through like everything that was going to happen before it happened, and so when I showed up, I had a better idea of the routine of it. Um,
Right. And Natalia, I was thinking about this, talk about everybody goes through nerves. And I was thinking about every show does a table read for the first time. And I had to believe that that table read the first time you're sitting with a bunch of people that you don't really know, that had to be a little nerve wracking as well, correct?
you know, so many shows do table reads. Boston Public didn't. We didn't do
Oh, okay.
table readings. We just did rehearsals before each setup, like this, like the story I just told about Shy, but we didn't do table readings. When I did Hannah Montana, that one does a table reading. Sitcoms definitely do table readings, and I think a lot of 1 hours do, but for whatever reason, yeah, Boston Public didn't. I don't know why we didn't. Maybe that's not part of David's process, or maybe it's just that show, but yeah, we didn't do table readings.
Right. And Natalia, correct me if I'm wrong. At the time when your character debuted on Boston Public, and it was the storyline, like I said, where Carmen, she fought Stephen on how she was going to only talk to the class in, you know, Spanish. She wasn't going to speak English. There was a situation that was going on at a school in Massachusetts as well. And Boston Public, that the writers never like hinted that on the show when they were doing the episodes. But I do think at the time there was a similar situation going on where a teacher was, her principal was giving her a hard time because she wasn't doing what he asked her to do. So, in a lot of ways, your character was based on a true story.
Really? I didn't even know that. I mean, I know they used
Yeah.
to rip storylines from headlines about schools. Like, again, I think it was like one of my first or second episodes. There was like a story in the news about kids that were like cutting their tongues to look like snakes.
Yeah.
So makeup and hair was like making like, the actors that were playing those roles of like the kids in the class that had cut their tongue, like to somehow like with special effects make it look like that. And so I remember that was like from a headline. I think they definitely like took things from headlines, and I don't remember which episode they won the Peabody for, but before my time, the show had won the Peabody Award, which is so prestigious. Um, so I do think that they definitely were trying to highlight different areas of public high schools that sort of needed a light shed on them. The diversity and the lack of, uh, just tolerance for certain things. I think there was a big episode about the N word. I think that might have been the one that won the Peabody before my time.
Yeah.
But I always felt really, really blessed to be a part of a show. I mean, obviously, David Kelly's writing was so incredible, and to be with such seasoned, amazing actors. Um, but also the fact that I really loved that all of the episodes sort of like presented a situation, or an issue in a high school, but they didn't always tell you how to feel. They just sort of like presented it, and it left a little room for you to come to your own conclusion about it. It didn't really like weigh heavy on which side was right or wrong, and I always liked that because I felt like it engaged the viewer more, and just sort of like, I don't know. I guess I imagine if you happen to be in high school and watching it with like your parents or something, it would leave room for conversation, I guess, no matter who you're watching it with.
Right. And now you did about 14 episodes, but is there one episode that stood out to you where you really enjoyed doing more than the others?
I mean, to be truly honest, I mean, I really loved all of them, but probably, I mean, the stuff with Milo was so fun, and he was such a good actor, and I learned a lot from him. So probably there was one episode that we went on like a golfing date that was really fun, and we got to shoot at Griffith Park. Um, and that was like a great episode. And then the one where he died. They did a very like 20, again, a show I didn't watch, but I know the premise. Like they made him a very 21 Jump Street,
Yeah.
situation. He was like an undercover cop and blah blah or whatever. So the episode where he died and I visited him in the hospital and all of that. That one was really, fun to shoot. Uh but I really loved like literally every single day because it was like my dream come true,
Right.
so honestly, like when and I understand if everyone arrives at this profession for different reasons or at different stages or whatever, but whenever like the vibe wasn't like A+ on set, and the AD would turn to me and be like, do you need anything? I could not have been happier. Like there was nothing I needed, everything was great, I was so thrilled. So I really did love every single day and all of the episodes. Plus, I was very blessed that so much of it was written for my character. So I had a lot of fun stuff to work with. And
Yeah, and Natalia, so many fans loved your character, myself included.
thank
But
you.
but the thing that still bothers me to this day, and 20 years now, is there was never an explanation why your character was just written off. Nobody, all of a sudden, she was just gone,
I
and
know.
it really bothered me. What ended up happening? And was it more about just like a lot of times what shows do is they have to cut people because of the budget and everything else like that? Is that really what happened with your character and you?
What honestly what happened is like before I even joined the show, um, Fox had moved the show from like 8 p.m. on, I can't remember, but
Monday,
it
Monday
Monday,
night.
okay,
Yeah,
to 9 p.m. on Friday, and it was a show
right.
about high school. So like high school kids aren't home on Friday night to watch a TV show, and they also like they had planned like a big campaign, like we did even like a billboard shoot and all of that to sort of announce the move and everything. And normally they'd start the show, um, I think after the World Series, but this year they did it before, and they did like no, they ended up doing no campaign for it. So even people who like loved the show and were true fans didn't know where to find it. And then I think Fox was just sort of like pushing it out the door, like when shows get put on Friday night, usually, back in the day it was like getting pushed out the door, so that was happening before I even joined. And then also, because we got replaced by Joe Millionaire, the European version or something. It was like
Yeah,
they were trying to save, and God bless Fox, please give me another job. But I think it was that. And then technically speaking, so I joined for what was the fourth and ultimately the final season, but I think that was predetermined sort of by the network before we even got
yeah.
started. And the reason that, so I don't even think the whole series got a proper send off.
No, not
Um,
at all. Right.
but I didn't get one because the whole thing wasn't planned. And also, yes, like because it was, you know, the the way our contracts and things like that are done, after a certain amount of time you get like this, that, and the other. And because everyone on earth would want to work for David Kelly, and it was my first show, you know I was gonna get like a bonus after that episode. And since the show was sort of not necessarily staying, my I it was a financial decision, because they were trying to get, I think, like who was it? Matthew McConaughey to play one of the, like, recurring roles or something. They were trying to stunt cast it to like keep it on the air, but ultimately I don't think Fox wanted to. But I remember when it happened, David Kelly, who is a man of very few words, and has sort of like a stern personality, but is so brilliant and so kind and so wonderful. But just he's very, I think it's almost even a sense of humor. He called me into his office and sat me down and said all the things that like my mother would say to me, like that you would only dream of somebody in that position would say, like he told me, that I had that, I had that star quality and that, his wife, Michelle Pfeiffer, his wife and his sister-in-law were actresses. And so he knows, this is a very, difficult industry and, please, that I had that shining it quality and don't let this industry beat that out of me. And I was like, yes, yes, sir. But I walked out the door, called my mom, called my manager, my agent, told them this amazing news. And I was like, I'm never going to lose it. And like 5 minutes later, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. But you learn too, Natalia, that you always have to be ready for something like that to happen, that nothing's guaranteed in the work you
Sure.
do. But you went on to do other great things. And one of the things that I'm fascinated about, Natalia, and I think it's very challenging to do, is when you do short films. And you've done a couple short films. I could think of The Monster, you played Helena. Then I could think of Cyclone, you played Emma. But it's really weird because you've got to kind of make a short film. In a regular film, it's 90 minutes, maybe 90 minutes plus. Short films are like maybe 8 minutes, and you got to try to start a beginning, a middle, and finish within a matter of 10 minutes. That's not easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, the most recent one I did was Cyclone. Uh, which my co-star, who was the writer of and one of the the producer of that film, I met when I was 17, when we were both 17 at NYU at that summer program, and he was always a brilliant artiste back then, and he went to NYU for the 4 years and ended up starting like a theater company in New York, and then this film was part of the film branch that came out of that theater company. And he had been working on this story for years, and he had done many things in between, like. But this one he had sort of been working on with me in mind since, um, God, for like I think 15 years, and it was such a beautiful story. It changed a little bit from what I had originally read in the original concept. Um, but all along, it was something that I wanted to do because he always brings together like amazing artists that, I think of all the big and small and whatever in between size projects I've been on. That one was the time that everybody on set had a vision and an opinion, but also was like open to collaboration. It was such a beautiful experience. So I think there's a lot that it's all about the script, really. I mean, for anything. But with shorts, I think there's a lot like unseen and unsaid usually. There's a lot in between the lines. So I think as long as that understanding for yourself as an actor and for the group as a whole, like as a team, um, is clear, then you can tell a story in a shorter period of time. Um, so really just the writing and the execution, and they're really, I don't know, they're interesting. It's a fun thing to get to be a part of when it's a good script and a good group of people, because it does sort of force you to um, do a lot of work in between the lines, and in between the scenes and
Yeah.
things like that.
Right.
And some films that I love the most are sort of like vignette style films. Like I don't know if you ever seen a movie called New York Stories, and if you haven't, you should
Oh
totally
yeah.
see it. I loved
That.
that movie my whole life, and that's like four shorts in one movie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's very creative how the writers do it, and the actors that play it do so well. The other thing too, Natalia. I was a big Monster Squad fan, so I would hear these Comic Con conventions and the movie would be so popular. And I always say this, that if there's these conventions out there and these fans line up to go to them, that's how you know your movie was a success. Who cares what the media says? Because the media is going to criticize regardless. And Red Velvet to this day, I mean, there are still diehard fans that go out to those conventions and stuff like that. And your character, Amy, I mean, she was so likable. I mean, it was such a great, film. But that's got to make you proud to realize that a film that you did 16 years ago is still popular today, and people still go out to the conventions to, you know, see the different things there, because there's so many things you could buy there, the little action figures, the comic, you name it, it's got all this cool stuff. So it's got to make you proud to know that you're part of a movie that still is a cult classic to this day.
That's so kind to hear. I did right after that movie was released, they had Henry Thomas, who's,
Yeah.
an amazing actor. Everybody knows him as Little Kid in E.T., but he's done so many things like Gangs of New York, a million different things. And he's always been a tremendous talent. They had him and I like do the conventions. Like I think we went to Texas, we went to San Francisco, and I knew nothing of that world, because I had never been to a convention like that. So we did like Fangoria, we did, I don't remember, a bunch of them, and did the table and the signing and the whole thing. And like I remember our booth was like next to Freddy Krueger, and like
Yeah.
it was all, I was so floored by the whole situation. And all the people behind the scenes of that film were true horror fans. And I hate scary movies. Like I was truly screaming for real running in the forest in that film, because scary things, like I just have a very active imagination, and it's just like I won't be able to sleep at night if I watch that stuff. So it's not a world I know much about, but everybody behind the scenes truly loved that art form. And so it was very important to them to like be honoring it, and celebrating it and all of that. So that was a very cool experience um, to get to be a part of. It was really fun. It was really fun. And for like the size, because that was like a smaller film as well, for the size of the budget of that film, I think they did a really amazing job of who they brought together, in the
Yeah.
actors and in, our director and everything. So it was really like an elegant situation for what it was. And it was really fun. They let us improv a lot, which is always nice as an actor. um that's a blessing to get to do. But that's very kind. I didn't know that. I didn't know people still
Oh yeah. Yeah.
watch that movie.
Oh yeah, it's very popular to this day, and I mean it's a great movie. And anybody that has not seen it, I would encourage to. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, one of the streaming networks, but a great movie. And another movie, Natalia, that I thought was kind of, fit in for you as well is you played a teacher on Boston Public, but in this movie you got to be a principal, and that was High School Possession.
Oh yeah.
So talk about that, because now I'm thinking to myself, God, she's like a few years younger than me, and when this film came out, she probably wasn't even in her 40s yet. So you're playing a high school principal at such a young age. Talk about that experience.
I my mother always looked like legitimately 20 years younger than she was. Like she blessed me with like really good genes. So I've always looked significantly younger than I am. Like when I did Hannah Montana, I
Yeah.
was 28 playing 15, and the breakdown said that they only wanted to see real 16 and 17-year-olds. And my manager at the time was like, "Oh, you don't have to go to this." And I was like, they're only seeing real 16 and 17-year-olds. And I was like, "No, I'm going to book it." And I went and I played 16, 15, 16 opposite like real 15, 16-year-old, Miley Cyrus and whatever. And I was 28, and they didn't know, because they're not allowed to ask how old you are. It's just like over under 18 or whatever. And they didn't even ask me that at the audition. So I was close to like the age of like the mom of the kid whose girlfriend I was playing, then like the kid. And they
Yeah.
kept trying to send me to like school on set. And I was like, "Oh no, my tutor's in my dressing room, it's fine, I don't have to go." And the kid whose girlfriend I was playing kept being like, and like thank goodness, like our like we go to kiss but we don't kiss. So it was like not as creepy. But I guess all that to say, I've always been lucky to look younger than I am. So I don't know if they were necessarily thinking about the age for that film. I think it was just something that they the writer and the director and the producer, I think it was like I had met them for several projects over the years, and they hadn't cast the principal yet. And I think it was one of these situations where they just wanted to work together, and this happened to be a role that was available, and so it was like, why don't you play this, sort
Yeah.
of a thing. It wasn't, I don't think, so calculated, but it was fun. And again, like, that movie had some really cool actors in it. Gosh, what, Ione Skye. I got to do a scene with Ione Skye. Like, she's tremendous, you know.
Yeah, it was a very good movie. And the other thing I was thinking about too, Natalia, that's got to be, I don't want to say difficult, but again, challenging is you guest starred on a few shows, Burn Notice, Veronica Mars, and whenever somebody has to guest star in a show, I always say that that's got to be a little challenging for the simple fact that you're kind of going into a show where the cast knows each other well, they work with each other all the time, and you're kind of there for one or two episodes. So you're kind of, entering a show that they've already been doing for so long, and you've got to really kind of get to, your character has to kind of feed off of the regular characters and what they do. So that could be a little challenging at times as well when you guest star on something, right?
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, it's always like, yes, I mean, the tone of like a set is very much, I think, informed by like the number one on the call sheet, and by the culture created by like the people who are there all the time. So that's like a better or worse experience depending on the vibe that's already there before you get there. But yeah, sure. It's because you're not necessarily, it's like being the new kid in school. So shows that I've done, that most of my interactions are with another new person, is a different experience. Like, I guess when I did Veronica Mars, like my first episode of Veronica Mars, I was very heavy with an actor, musician, Jeff D'Agostino played like my, you know,
Yeah.
boyfriend who, like, what was it, he like tried to sell a sex tape or something,
Yeah.
whatever. So that we were both new kids, in this situation, and we bonded, and a lot of our stuff was together. So when you're brought on and your storylines are involving somebody else who's new to the situation, that's sometimes easier. Um, but also it really depends on who you're working with. But sure, it can be a little nerve-wracking. Like that show, I also did a lot of scenes with Kristen, and she was very nice,
Yeah.
and everything. So it really depends on how welcoming or unwelcoming the cast is. But also, it's not your, while it's so wonderful to make friends on set, and I tend to, and usually everyone does, like, you're also there to do a job. You're not there to make friends. So like, I try to like remember, like, it's okay if I don't like know anybody or what, you know what I mean? Um but yeah, it is a little nerve-wracking when you're brand new and nobody else is, but it's also like a wonderful opportunity to get to uh be with people who are at the highest level. And it's a nice challenge to try to like fit into the style of a situation and a new group of people and all of that. And a lot of things I've done, actually, like some of the key players are the same. Like when I did Burn Notice, it was in part because the director of that episode of Burn Notice had done one of my episodes of Veronica Mars, so he knew
Yeah.
me from that. So I mean, it's LA, like the industry is a little bit of a small town in that way.
Right. So let me ask you, Natalia, as of right now in 2024, are you still acting quite a bit, or have you kind of like taken a break from it? What is the future for Natalia Baron?
Um, I took some time off to take care of my family. I was in Miami for a year and a half, and back and forth. So that took a lot of my energy and my time, and my mother just passed. That's what I was in Miami.
Yeah.
Um, spending time with her. So now now I came back to LA and began refocusing on myself and my career and the dreams that we mutually have always had for me, and the goals and everything that I still have yet to do and be and succeed with. So that was a huge focus for the past several years. But I absolutely am, you know, rejoining my industry and my career. Like I said, I'm doing a film that was supposed to start in 2 weeks, but now it got pushed a month.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like I remember five-ish, going back to Boston Public, was 81 when we were working together.
Yeah.
And so they used to write him out of every third episode to give him a break, because they wanted him to rest or whatever. And he would still show up on set. And he
Yeah.
was very curmudgeonly. He was so much fun. He was very, very curmudgeonly. And he would show up and bitch because he didn't want the time off. Like, he wanted to work.
Right.
And I was like, I want to be like that. I want to be a little old lady, but not look it, and still be working, and still as an actress, still loving what I was doing. And when I was at USC, I was blessed to take a directing class. I was like an actor in an MFA directing class. Like you audition to be in this class that this actress, Nina Foch, who's since passed, was teaching, and she was like old and had like this big scarf and was loving what she was doing, and I was like, I want to be like that. I want to teach a master class. I want to do this part. So I don't think I would ever give it up, but I certainly um my whole heart and soul and time and everything went into being with my mother. And now it's time for me to fulfill the dreams that we've always had for me. But it's been a bit of a process coming back to myself. My mom was the love of my life and of many lifetimes, and left me too early and too suddenly. And so I know that acting and art is the way that I will be able to use all of that grief and pain and everything in a transformative and helpful to myself and hopefully someone else way. But it also is like a relearning of who I am without her that sort of made me take slower steps towards rejoining my purpose.
Right. And Natalia, I was thinking about this too. At some point in your career, whether you direct it or act in it, you have to do something that involves snowboarding because you are an avid snowboarder. You love doing that in your spare time. And I think that would be great for you to actually play a part at something you really love to do. So I hope at some point in
That
your
would
career,
be cool.
yeah,
I was actually just talking with my brother. I have one brother. He's the coolest ever. He's in Miami, and I have one niece who's just turned 3, and she's very athletic and beautiful and brilliant, and she's good at everything. And she just got a skateboard. She's really good at the skateboard, but they haven't gone to the snow yet. And I was like, oh, you have to take her snowboarding, and we'll have to take her. And he's like, she's probably gonna be great at it. So yeah, I was just thinking about snowboarding this week. That would be fun. That definitely would be fun. I've shot in fake snow, but not real snow. Um,
right. Well, Natalia, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. It was a real honor for
Thank you
me.
so much for having me.
No problem. And when this film does come out, your latest project, we got to have you back on and you could
I
discuss
would love
that.
that.
That would be great. But I really do applaud all the work you do. And again, that run yet on Boston Public, I always remember that character. She was just, Carmen was so tremendous and you did such a great job. And everything you've done since then, you're just you're a remarkable person in the sense that you give everybody hope that, hey, you want to do something, don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. Just go out there and make it happen. And you've really kind of been, a shining example for people like that. And I really do applaud everything you do. And best of luck going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank
Well,
you. It
thank
was an
you.
honor.
Thank you. Well, there you have it, folks. I encourage you to check out the stuff that Natalia has done over her career if you haven't seen it yet. I know so many of you have seen Boston Public, you've seen Red Velvet, but she's, so talented at everything she does. Make sure you look at everything she does out there because she really does a tremendous job. And the best is yet to come for her. She's
Thank
a
you.
hardworking person. And again, she's proof that, you go out there and you fulfill your dreams and you just have that moniker that is don't dream it, be it. And Natalia is a perfect example of that. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.